Look, there's a reason why Mike Tyson made $400 million and went bankrupt while a janitor named Ronald Reed died with $8 million. It's not about intelligence, education, or even how much money you start with. It's about ancient psychological principles that have controlled human wealth for over 4,000 years. Here's what's crazy. Smart people make terrible money decisions every single day. Doctors go bankrupt. Engineers fall for get-rich-quick schemes. Successful business owners sabotage their own wealth through patterns they don't even recognize. Meanwhile, ordinary people with ordinary jobs quietly build extraordinary fortunes. Traditional financial advice focuses on spreadsheets and investment strategies, but completely ignores the psychological reality of how humans actually behave with money. We think we make logical decisions, but ancient civilizations understood something that modern science is just now proving. Money decisions happen in your emotional brain first, logical brain second. What's fascinating is that there are 5 timeless truths about wealth psychology that ancient cultures discovered thousands of years ago. Truths that modern behavioral science has now validated with hard data. Today, I'm revealing these 5 ancient money principles that separate those who build lasting wealth from those who make money and lose it all. The 5th truth is so counterintuitive that 95% of Americans do the exact opposite, which is why they stay financially trapped despite making good money. If you've ever wondered why smart people make dumb money choices, comment money psychology below. Let me start with the first ancient truth that explains why even brilliant people can't control their financial destiny. Truth number 1, you're not in control. The ancient wisdom that humbles modern success stories. The first ancient truth that destroys most people's financial planning is this: you're not fully in control of your success. Americans love to believe that if we just work hard enough, make the right choices, and grind every day, success is guaranteed. But ancient civilizations understood something we've forgotten. Luck and risk play a much bigger role than we want to admit. Most people look at Bill Gates and think, he's a genius who worked hard, so if I do the same things, I'll succeed too. But they ignore the invisible factors that ancient wisdom always accounted for. Gates happened to attend one of the only high schools in America that had a computer in the 1960s. His best friend, Kent Evans, was equally smart and ambitious, but died in a mountaineering accident before they could build their tech empire together. The difference between Gates becoming a billionaire and Evans dying young wasn't skill, intelligence, or effort. It was luck and risk forces completely outside their control. There's a profound story from the book of Ecclesiastes, written over 2,500 years ago, that captures this truth perfectly. I have seen something else under the sun. The race is not to the swift or the battle to the strong, nor does food come to the wise or wealth to the brilliant or favor to the learned, but time and chance happen to them all. Ancient Jewish merchants built their entire financial philosophy around this principle. They never attributed success purely to skill or failure purely to stupidity. The Talmud teaches that a wise person always acknowledges the role of divine providence in business outcomes, which keeps them humble during prosperity and hopeful during setbacks. Greek philosophers understood this through the concept of hubris, the dangerous pride that comes from believing you control outcomes you don't actually control. They watched brilliant leaders make terrible decisions because success had convinced them they were invincible. Chinese merchants followed the principle of preparing for both dragons and droughts, building wealth strategies that could survive both extreme good fortune and devastating bad luck, because they knew both were possible regardless of skill level. Here's what you must do immediately. Position yourself for luck while preparing for risk. Put yourself in environments where good things can happen. Invest in markets that have historically grown, develop skills that create opportunities, and build relationships with successful people. But simultaneously prepare for things going wrong. Maintain emergency funds, avoid over-leveraging, and never bet everything on any single outcome. Stop judging successful people as pure geniuses and failed people as complete idiots. Success is never 100% skill, and failure is never 100% stupidity. This creates humility during good times and resilience during bad times. A construction worker named Tom understood this principle perfectly. He invested consistently in index funds for 20 years, while his friends either avoided investing, fearing risk, or bet everything on hot stocks, ignoring risk. When the market crashed in 2008, Tom's diversified approach and emergency fund kept him investing while others panicked and sold. His humility about what he could and couldn't control made him wealthy, while others' overconfidence destroyed them. Ancient wisdom teaches us that acknowledging the limits of your control actually gives you more control over what you can influence. Truth number 2: getting versus keeping wealth. Why ancient merchants understood two different games. The second ancient truth reveals why so many people who make fortunes lose them just as quickly. Getting wealthy and staying wealthy require completely opposite skills. Most Americans think wealth is one game, but ancient civilizations knew it was actually two different games with different rules, different strategies, and different mindsets. Getting wealthy requires optimism, risk-taking, and aggressive action. You start businesses, invest in new opportunities, negotiate bigger paychecks, and make bold leaps that others are too scared to make. Every great success story has a moment where someone bet big and won. Jeff Bezos quitting Wall Street to sell books online, or Elon Musk risking his PayPal fortune on Tesla. But staying wealthy requires the exact opposite: humility, patience, and knowing when to stop gambling. The moment you get money, you must switch from offense to defense, from growth mode to preservation mode. This mental shift destroys most newly wealthy people because they keep playing the aggressive game that makes them rich. Ancient Babylonian merchants understood this distinction perfectly. The Code of Hammurabi included specific laws about two phases of wealth: acquisition and preservation. Young merchants were encouraged to take calculated risks during the acquisition phase. But once they accumulated substantial wealth, they were expected to follow conservative preservation rules that protected family resources across generations. Biblical wisdom teaches this same principle through the story of Joseph in Egypt. During 7 years of abundance, Joseph aggressively collected and stored grain, a bold, risky strategy that required massive resource allocation. But during 7 years of famine, he switched to careful distribution and preservation, ensuring resources lasted through the entire crisis. Joseph understood that the skills needed for accumulation, boldness, were deadly during preservation, requiring caution. Chinese merchant families perfected this philosophy through their concept of generational thinking. The first generation took enormous risks to build wealth. The second generation learned preservation skills to maintain it. The third generation learned both acquisition and preservation to grow it responsibly. This systematic approach helped Chinese business families survive wars, revolutions, and economic upheavals that destroyed single-generation thinkers. Here's your actionable strategy. Clearly define your financial phases and switch strategies accordingly. If you're building wealth, take calculated risks. Start that side business, negotiate aggressively, and invest in growth assets. But once you reach your target net worth, switch to preservation mode. Diversify investments, reduce risk, build larger emergency funds, and focus on protecting what you've built. The key is knowing when to make the transition. Ancient wisdom suggests switching when losing your current wealth would change your lifestyle significantly. At that point, preservation becomes more important than growth. A restaurant owner named Carlos followed this principle perfectly. He took huge risks for 10 years, building his business, reinvesting every profit, and working 80-hour weeks. Once he reached a $2 million net worth, he switched strategies completely, hired managers, diversified into conservative investments, and focused on maintaining his wealth rather than growing it aggressively. His friends called him boring, but Carlos understood that the skills that made him wealthy could also destroy him if applied at the wrong time. Ancient merchants knew something modern Americans have forgotten. There's a time to plant and a time to harvest, a time to risk and a time to preserve. Truth number 3. Save for freedom. The ancient secret of what money really buys. The third ancient truth that most Americans completely misunderstand is this. The real purpose of saving money isn't to buy more expensive things, it's to buy freedom. Most people think of saving as delayed spending, like I'll save so I can buy a nicer car later, or I'll save for that dream vacation. But ancient wisdom reveals that real wealth isn't about accumulating possessions. It's about purchasing options and control over your own life. Most Americans are trapped in what ancient philosophers called golden handcuffs. They make good money but have zero savings, which means they have zero choices. They stay in toxic jobs because they can't afford to quit. They accept bad treatment because they're living paycheck to paycheck. They're prisoners of their own lifestyle inflation, working harder to afford things that don't actually improve their lives. There's a powerful story from ancient Chinese philosophy about two farmers. The first farmer spent every harvest on better clothes, finer foods, and a more luxurious home, impressing his neighbors with his apparent success. The second farmer lived modestly and stored grain from every harvest. When drought struck, the first farmer became a beggar, dependent on others for survival. The second farmer not only survived but thrived, buying land from desperate neighbors at discount prices. The lesson was profound. Apparent wealth often masks real poverty, while apparent modesty often conceals real wealth. Ancient Jewish merchants understood this principle through their concept of true freedom. The Talmud teaches that a person isn't truly free until they can survive for at least 1 year without working. This wasn't about laziness, it was about having enough resources to make decisions based on wisdom rather than desperation. Roman Stoics like Marcus Aurelius, despite having access to unlimited imperial wealth, deliberately practiced voluntary poverty to understand the difference between wants and needs. They knew that the more possessions you happiness, the less free you actually were. Here's what you should do immediately. Build what modern people call an few fund. Money that gives you the power to walk away from bad situations. Start with $1,000. Then build toward 3 months of expenses, then 6 months, then a full year. This isn't money for spending, it's money for options. Calculate this life-changing math. Even having 6 months of savings puts you in a completely different position than 78% of Americans who live paycheck to paycheck. You can quit toxic jobs, leave bad relationships, move to better opportunities, or take calculated risks that others can't afford. A teacher named Jennifer built her Freedom Fund for 3 years, while her friends spent their raises on lifestyle upgrades. When her principal became abusive and her friends said, "Just deal with it," Jennifer walked away without stress or panic. 6 months later, she found a better job at higher pay because she could interview selectively instead of desperately. Ancient wisdom understood something modern Americans have forgotten. The best thing money can buy isn't a bigger house or fancier car. It's the freedom to say no when you need to, and yes when you want to. Truth number 4. Invisible wealth. Why the richest people look at the poorest. The fourth ancient truth that shocks most Americans is this. Real wealth is invisible, while apparent wealth is often fake. When you see someone driving a Ferrari or wearing a Rolex, all you know is that they spent money on a Ferrari and Rolex. You have no idea how much wealth they actually have left. Ancient civilizations understood that true prosperity hides in plain sight, while poverty often dresses up in expensive costumes. The story of Ronald Read perfectly illustrates this ancient principle. This janitor drove a beat-up car, wore old clothes, and looked like he was barely scraping by. Meanwhile, his neighbors bought new cars and designer clothes and constantly upgraded their lifestyles to look successful. When Ronald died at 92, He left behind $8 million, while his flashy neighbors had nothing but debt and possessions they couldn't afford. Ancient Jewish merchants practiced this principle through their concept of tzniut, intentional modesty that concealed true wealth from envious eyes and potential thieves. They understood that displaying wealth attracted danger, while hiding wealth attracted opportunity. The Talmud teaches that the truly wealthy dress simply because they have nothing to prove to anyone. Chinese merchants throughout history followed the philosophy of hidden dragon, appearing ordinary while building extraordinary wealth. They knew that conspicuous consumption made them targets for taxation, theft, and social pressure, while invisible wealth gave them power and flexibility. Roman philosophers like Seneca wrote extensively about the difference between apparent riches and actual riches. Apparent riches were possessions that impressed others but provided no real security. Actual riches were resources that created independence and peace of mind, even if no one else could see them. Biblical wisdom teaches this through Proverbs. There is one who makes himself rich, yet has nothing, and one who makes himself poor, yet has great riches. The truly wealthy often appear poor because they're building assets rather than acquiring liabilities. Here's your actionable strategy. Focus obsessively on net growth, not lifestyle display. Every dollar you don't spend on impressing others is a dollar that can compound and multiply for decades. Track your net worth monthly, not your income or expenses. Celebrate hitting investment milestones privately rather than buying celebration purchases publicly. Ask yourself before every major purchase, am I buying this because it genuinely improves my life or because I want others to think I'm successful? If it's the second reason, invest that money instead of spending it. A software engineer named David learned this principle at 25 when he chose a used Honda Civic over a new BMW, invested the difference for 15 years, and now has over $400,000 in assets. His friends who chose impressive cars are still making payments, while David's invisible wealth gives him options they can't imagine. Warren Buffett still lives in the same house he bought in 1958, not because he can't afford a mansion, but because he values invisible wealth over visible status. Ancient wisdom teaches that wealth whispers while poverty shouts, and the truly wealthy understand the power of financial silence. Truth number 5. Emotions control everything, plus integration. Why ancient wisdom beats perfect math every time. The fifth and most crucial ancient truth is this: money decisions are never purely logical. They're always emotional first, then rationalized later. Most Americans think they make financial choices based on spreadsheets and calculations, but ancient civilizations understood that humans are emotional creatures who happen to be capable of logic, not logical creatures who occasionally feel emotions. This is why perfect financial advice usually fails. An advisor can show you that putting 100% of your money in the stock market historically produces the highest returns over 50 years. But what happens when the market crashes 40% and your emotions take over? You panic, sell at the bottom, and lock in devastating losses. Ancient wisdom always accounted for human psychology in financial planning. Biblical wisdom teaches this through Jeremiah's warning. The heart is deceitful above all things, meaning your emotions will trick you into thinking short-term feelings are long-term logic. Ancient Jewish merchants built their trading systems around this principle, never making major decisions when emotions were high. Confucian philosophy distinguishes between knowing and practicing, understanding that intellectual knowledge means nothing without emotional discipline. Confucius taught that true wisdom comes from aligning your actions with your knowledge consistently over time, not from having a perfect theoretical understanding. The Talmud makes a crucial distinction between rational and reasonable behavior. Rational behavior is mathematically optimal but ignores human psychology. Reasonable behavior might not be perfectly optimal, but it accounts for your emotional limitations and actually works in real life. Marcus Aurelius, despite being the most powerful man in the world, spent enormous energy learning to control his emotional reactions to money and power. He understood that external wealth was useless without internal discipline. Here's your actionable integration strategy. Choose financial plans you can actually stick with emotionally, not plans that look perfect on paper. If market volatility makes you lose sleep, keep some money in boring savings accounts, even though they earn less. If complicated investment strategies overwhelm you, stick with simple index funds even if they're not optimal. These 5 ancient truths work together as a complete system. Accept that you can't control everything. Truth number 1, so build wealth aggressively but preserve it conservatively. Truth number 2, save money for freedom, not possessions. Truth number 3, and let your wealth stay invisible. Truth number 4, most importantly, choose strategies that work with your emotions, not against them. Truth number 5. A nurse named Patricia applied all 5 truths systematically. She accepted that investing involved uncontrollable risk, but positioned herself for long-term growth. She built wealth through consistent saving, then switched to preservation mode once she hit her target. She saved for freedom, not status, keeping her wealth invisible while her coworkers spent raises on lifestyle inflation. Most importantly, she chose boring, reasonable strategies she could stick with for decades, rather than optimal strategies that stressed her out. Ancient wisdom teaches that the best financial plan isn't the one with the highest theoretical return. It's the one that lets you sleep peacefully while building wealth consistently. These 5 ancient truths haven't changed in thousands of years. The same psychological patterns that controlled wealth in ancient Babylon, Greece, Rome, and China are still operating in your brain with every financial decision you make today. You can't fully control success. Getting wealth requires different skills than keeping it. Money should buy freedom, not possessions. Real wealth stays invisible, and emotions always trump logic in financial decisions. What's fascinating is that modern behavioral science has now validated what ancient civilizations knew intuitively. Wealth isn't about math. It's about psychology. The families who understood these principles built fortunes that lasted generations, while those who ignored them lost everything despite brilliant intellects and hard work. This week, pick one of these 5 truths and apply it to one financial decision. Maybe accept that you can't control market timing, so just start investing consistently. Or switch from growth to preservation mode if you've already built substantial wealth. Or build your freedom fund instead of upgrading your lifestyle. The specific choice matters less than understanding that these truths work together as a complete system. Comment ancient wisdom if you're ready to follow money principles that have worked for thousands of years, instead of chasing whatever financial trend is popular this month. If you want to see specific strategies for applying these ancient truths to modern investing, building emergency funds, and wealth preservation techniques, let me know below. Remember, the psychology of money hasn't evolved, but your understanding of it can transform your financial future. These aren't just financial principles. They're life principles that determine whether you control money or money controls you.